And welcome to Unsupervised Broadcasting. I'm David Crook. I'm a software engineer. Format for the day, we're going to start off, I've actually got a format. So we're going to do some fan mail first. Surprise, we for a no broadcast ever kind of podcast vlog situation, we have one set of fan mail. Crazy. We've got news item from the week, something I learned this week, something challenging from the week. We'll give an update on Easy Stock Investor, the startup. I've got a lot of folks that I know are interested in that. And then we've got a next up. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at fan mail. So one of the folks that I know, Miss Fatine, asked a couple questions. So we're going to label this as fan mail. May or may not actually qualify as fan mail since she works with me, but whatever. It's a live broadcast, got no users, so we're just going to run with it for now. So basically the question she's got is around IoT. So if you don't know, I specialize in connected devices for work. And wants to know about, like, are there differences between manufacturing, industrial, medical, real estate, so forth and so on. So then she also kind of continues to ask, you know, maybe shifting careers. If you're thinking about going into IoT, there's a lot of different jobs available. What are the different jobs available? Is it a good career focus? So let's start with, is it a good career focus? And I wanted to, yeah, that's right. I added this so I can point. How cool is that? I'd say it is a good career focus. I mean, like, IoT, like connected devices, is super hard. It's probably one of the technologically most challenging things I've ever done. I've done machine learning, I've done infrastructure, scalable compute, connected devices across a bunch of different industrial verticals. That's kind of what I'm doing now. And man, that's a big challenge. So I'd say that the skills are very hard to get, so you're going to have a lot less people. In fact, we see this. There's a lot of projects that come through, and we just don't, finding people to do them is really hard. So I'd say, yeah, for sure, it's a good career focus. And then we can kind of take a look at, like, what the numbers. I did a quick bit of research on Glassdoor to see, how much does Glassdoor say they're going to pay. I'm not going to discuss any day job numbers with anybody, but I'll go and find an external source that anybody can get and, kind of talk about that. So let's take a look. So if we go and industrially different. So what are some of the, so we'll go back to our first question, I guess, is there anything different between the industries? And I kind of broke it down into three different layers, because there's kind of like the engineering layer. So, if you're an engineer, what are you going to be doing? Is it going to be different between the industries? At the business layers, if you're focused on sales, execution, vision, strategy, that kind of thing, like, what's different there? And then there's support and operations as well. What's going to be different there? So, at the engineering layer, definitely, like, I kind of picked on three big ones that I kind of do a fair amount of work in. Agriculture, a lot of it's going to boil down to basically, like, what kind of protocol. Like, am I dealing with low power devices that are really tiny and really cost efficient? Or am I dealing with things where I've always got a power source, I've got, like, bukus of money, and it's going to have a lot of standards associated with it because there's a lot of vendors in the space. Or, like, DoD is going to be super overly regulated, so the options that are available to me are significantly different, have a lot more security constraints and compliance requirements as well. So from an engineering perspective, like, each industry definitely has many different constraints. Overall, it's all basically the same kind of stuff. It's just going to be, like, these nuanced differences. So once you get good at one industry, it's actually not bad to move to another industry, at least from the engineering side of the house. At the business layer, I kind of look at what a lot of folks do that we end up servicing. And I think that there is quite a bit of difference at the business layer. And again, it's going to be Fairly similar, I think, across all the different industries, but it's going to be, like nuanced differences, like an RFI, request for information. You're going to be looking for those in different places. You're going to be getting different types. You're going to have different considerations. The margins are going to be different. Like in a manufacturing scenario where everything that you make as a manufacturer has a cost of like 25 cents and you're going to sell it for like 50 cents, per item, your solution for IoT to make that better has to make it cost less, and your opportunity there is like 2 cents per thing that gets made. So like margins are super slim depending on what you're making. So that's where kind of the industrial aspect changes, because if you're in manufacturing, like low cost manufacturing, that's going to be completely different than like critical systems intelligence, like nuclear reactors, because darn things like $1 gazillion, and if it explodes, everybody dies. So like you have a lot more opportunity to do a lot more stuff in one of them, and the others you have to be a lot more cognizant about what you do and how you do it. And that ends up, that's a lot of that's going to be designed at the business layer. Support and operations, I picked an example from one that I had done many years ago, and basically if things went wrong, like you literally had to fly a helicopter to the mountains in Alaska and somebody had to get out and fix it. And like, not every industry is like that. That was in oil operations. So supportability is different for each of the industries. If it's in a factory and you got tons of workers there, like, okay, cool, go on your lunch break. But like, if you're doing like a remote oil rig or something, like, that's a very expensive situation to have to go out and do support and operations is different, right? Like, it's not just, Bob, go on your lunch break. It's, we need to get the helicopter, we got to get the people to the helicopter, we got to make sure you got everything. There's a lot more planning and money involved in that kind of stuff. Going back to her questions, let's take a look here. What was the next one? The jobs. Yeah, so let's take a look at some of these jobs real quick. So I kind of wrote down some of them. Here we go, jobs in IoT. So these were a bunch of things. I was just trying to write it out to see what all's out there. Lots and lots of engineering. I'm in engineering, so it's probably biased. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question, but I do a lot of this. It's basically like running a business, right? It's a software business, it's a business, and you've got a lot of specialized technical domains in it. So I think that's kind of, there's just a big old list. You can kind of go through it. I don't think I'm going to go through every single one of these. I put a fair amount of thought into that list, but there's a very diverse set of jobs in the space, and what you can do in the space. IoT, like it's a big bucket of stuff, man. Like you can really do a lot. Everything's IoT. The pay of jobs. So I went to Glassdoor just to get an idea. So this was, pretty optimistic, I guess. Looking at the cost of life these days, I don't know if it's that great anymore or not, but like, an architect being kind of a good pathway for a engineer, I mean, that looks amazing. Salespeople usually make a lot of money too. It's all commission based, so make sure you sell really expensive stuff. Like one of my buddies, what does he sell? He sells a pressure release valve for some kind of pipe that goes into nuclear reactors. That's super specialized. Darn thing's like $5 million though. Every time he makes one of those sales, he gets a boatload of money though. So that's a really, that's super variable. It's hard to say. But you're generally in the 100K plus range for those. All right, that's it for the fan mail. Let's go back and see news from the week. News from the week is kind of interesting because this week's had a lot of interesting things. Y'all have probably heard all about Russia. We're not going to talk about Russia and Ukraine. You can go watch the regular news for that. What I want to talk about is that Mark Zuckerberg essentially lost an entire country. Yes, an entire country. How in the world does he... you guys, the chat works. That's kind of cool. How does Mark Zuckerberg lose a country? Well, so Facebook stocks dropped by a lot, like 26%. So in total, it's $240 billion. So I thought, just out of curiosity, we'd pull up and see, okay, what country is that the equivalent of? And then how much did Mr. Zuckerberg lose personally? I didn't really know much about any of these countries, but he lost just around $35 billion in personal wealth. So I went to the GDP by country and found the first country under $35 billion. Turns out that's Cameroon. So I had to go to Google Maps. Let's see here. I'm actually on the wrong thing. We're going to go here. There we go. So this way. Point this way. So he lost Cameroon. So almost a Bahrain, not quite a Yemen, but Mr. Zuckerberg personally lost himself a Cameroon. Just for, visibility purposes, that means that he lost the equivalent of a wealth of a country approximately this size. It's a big old country. Look at that. That's Africa. Like all of Africa. That. And that didn't even put a dent in his wealth. He still has another $90 billion left. Not that I'm sour. Just to give you a little bit more of a reference, I figured we'd go to Wikipedia and see how big is it. Don't cry for me losing Argentina. Yeah, we'll have to see where Argentina is. I bet he might have a full wealth still equal to Argentina. That's a total area of 183,000 square miles. So he lost the equivalent wealth of 183,000 square miles of prime land. This is coastal land. Look at this. Cameroon is like, you got a nice coastal area. I mean, that's some serious stuff. So he lost that. In other news, talking about rich people not planning accordingly, the other news I wanted to talk about was Mr. Bezos, the king of logistics. So this guy is amazing at logistics. Look at what Amazon did. But he goes to go and charter his own personal yacht, right? So he gets a yacht built for him, huge yacht, and he forgets that there's a bridge in the way. So he has to go and talk to this country, I think it was Rotterdam, I think that was the city, and have them remove a 200-year-old bridge so that he can get his boat out of it. So much for logistical planning, gosh. I wish I could make mistakes that bad. So he's negotiated with them to remove the bridge, and then he'll build them a new one. These guys, man. First world problems. All right. Next thing on the list, something I learned this week. So I gotta go to only externally available stuff. Found this. So we're working with this company at work. Super cool looking company. They make an autonomous rancher. It sounds like some kind of futuristic robot that's going to go out and corral your cows and stuff. But neat thing, you can kind of go to their website and see, but basically it gives you like a whole status on cow health, where your cows are. They basically make a little tag that goes onto a cow's ear and gives GPS location and animal activity and basic wellness information. So I think the general idea, according to the website, is that they're going to help with the management and operations for very large cattle farms. So that was something kind of cool. It's neat to connect reality with technology sometimes, don't get just lost in what you're working on, but hey, pop out for a minute and see this thing helps people manage huge herds of cattle across large pieces of land. That's pretty cool. This should be a recurring segment. What country's GDP size did to obscenely rich person? we can look into having that as a recurring theme. All right, next up on the updates list, I got to do a segment on my startup. So I've been working on this for, I don't know, really long time. We're getting really close to launching, so I thought I'd take a look and show you kind of what's coming up. We've had to rebuild a lot of stuff on it. So what we're working on right now is we had basically a picker. It goes and it stack ranks all the stocks, so you can come here, hit that button. It's not loading right now, but the data is actually fulfilled. So just to give you an update what's going on here, pull up our database. Yeah, boring stuff, databases. But basically what it does is it's going through every industry. So you got healthcare, basic materials, technology, and we'll pick on technology because I'm in tech. And what we've got here is the latest pick. So I had it run, looks like 2 days ago. This is something just on my own machine. We haven't deployed this to the public internet yet. But it runs and it finds Apple, and you'll see that there's a bunch of these different scores. And one of the big ones is going to be a fundamental score, and Apple getting a 2. That's an interesting thing, because you'd think Apple, giant company, why is Apple getting a score of a 2? And it ends up boiling down to their earnings reports. Their share price is flying up faster than their ability to report earnings to match it. So basically that's throwing them into a negative category because their earnings per share as a trend has dropped over the past 2 years. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So that's going to get compared against all their competitors, peers, everybody inside of the technology sector, and then it basically stacks rank them. So update for the week on Easy Stock Investor is the pipeline's running. We're ingesting like all of the stocks across the entire domestic United States market. We're comparing them with their actual financial reports, and we're working out right now kind of merging in multiple metrics together to get a little bit of a better stack ranking going. So I think by the end of this week we should have basically a risk assessment by cross-referencing against the S&P 500, how predictable is this thing, and then also being able to tell where on the buy-sell curve from like a technical indicators perspective. If you guys do day trading, which I hope y'all don't do because it's very time consuming, there's a lot of information on that. We basically just take all that, smash it down into one score, and compare everybody together. That works. That's super cool. It plops into this, and next up for next week, hopefully we'll have a review to show like, hey, it works in the user interface. And then the last item on the list for today's broadcast is 3D printers. So this is the room where the 3D printers are. My children have gotten in here and done all sorts of stuff to this. There's one of them. So I've got 3D printer 1, and we got 3D printer 2. This room is an absolute mess. My wife absolutely hates it, and she's essentially said, you need to do something useful with these things or else. I'm not really sure what or else means, but I'm gonna venture to guess that it means that they're gonna end up disappearing. So I guess the ask is, I need something useful to do with these things, preferably not selling them. I do like them. And if post stuff in the chat, top rated item for what we're gonna do with the 3D printers wins, and it needs to be good enough to where my wife is convinced to keep them. So yeah, we'll go back to here. So that's it for today's broadcast. Send fan mail. We'll go through fan mail at the start of every Friday. We're gonna keep doing these Fridays at noon Eastern time. And